Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today, since hurricane season is just over a week away, we're going to be discussing for the second time this season what the 2024 hurricane season is going to be like, give it like a little forecast, and kind of like an analysis of how things could play out. So of course, be sure to stay tuned to the whole video so you don't miss any details about this season. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss any other weather content in the future. Alright, so just in case you guys don't know how it typically goes, usually over the past few years, the way I've done this is like I've given them just like an analysis of the way the Atlantic Basin is currently, and then I'll give like a hurricane season forecast towards like the end of the video. So of course, again, be sure to stay tuned for that. But let's just hop right into the video. Starting off here with our Atlantic storm names, just to give you like an idea of what the names are looking like this season. I'm not going to read every single one out, but you can just kind of pause the video if you need to and just look at them yourselves. Here we are, the ENSO alert status. So currently we're in an El Nino advisory, but there's also a La Nina watch. I know it's kind of weird, both are in place at the same time, because it will eventually switch over to a La Nina over the summer. So you can see the transition periods here. Between June and August, about a 50-50 chance of it happening. More likely than not, though, it's going to be middle, kind of later summer with a 69% chance of it happening. A transition to La Nina between July and September. Now, if we look at the Nino 3-4 index, all right, you can see here that we are kind of starting to drop out of the El Nino, right? We're kind of getting out of there. Now, this was last updated May 11th. This is from the Australian Bureau of Meteorology. Now, some other data is actually indicating that the sea surface temperatures are actually kind of lower than this, maybe between 0 and 0.4 degrees above average. Right, and these are anomalies, by the way, and then in the region you'll see a little later on in the video called Nino 3-4. It's near Hawaii. It's in the tropical Pacific, kind of like below Hawaii, and that's like our indicator of when you hear these things called like El Nino and La Nina. This is the region we typically look at to see where, which of the two or three, because there's also a neutral option, which of those three patterns that we could be in. Notice a descent in sea surface temperature anomalies. Right, as we head through the next few months, although these batch of models, the spaghetti models as we call them, don't necessarily, at least the average of them, doesn't have it getting to La Nina. But even if we just got back into ENSO neutral, which is what the neutral one is called, even if we just got back there, we've had plenty of hurricane seasons. At least one that comes to mind right away is 2004. That was a neutral hurricane season, and that was quite an active one. And 2005 was the La Nina season after that. That was just even more active. So either way, I feel like this season will definitely be more active than last year. And last year's was about average, but a little bit above on the name storm regard. But more on that later. So if we look at here, again, you can see the mean at the bottom. These are like 7 models, and this is the average of them. So you can see for the month of June, again, most models keeping things around the neutral state. July, we start creeping over towards La Nina. And then by August, I mean, we're definitely there. Now, there is a little bit of a lag time usually. Like, obviously, it's not like, boom, as soon as we hit that sea surface threshold, we're in La Nina, right? It does take, it doesn't take long, probably like a couple of weeks, maybe like a month for things to really settle in and the pattern really gets going. Right, but you can see for August, again, a couple models here putting us in the La Nina territory. Now, again, the way I've said this before, and I've probably said this every time I've used this website. This is from Australia, so they do measure El Nino and La Nina by different thresholds, right? We use 0.5, right? Absolute value 0.5 if you want to call it that. They use absolute value 0.8, right? So 0.8 in either direction for La Nina and El Nino. But again, I mean, both are still relatively similar measurements. If we look at September, again, creeping towards La Nina in October, it just progresses each month deeper into La Nina territory. Now, if we look at the sea surface temperature anomalies, right? Obviously, if you saw my first video back in March, right, it kind of looks something like this. I mean, this is the updated one, but not much has changed in the anomaly regard. Now, just because the anomalies are the same does not mean the sea surface temperatures have changed, right? Because sea surface temperatures usually warm up throughout the year. So if we were 2 degrees above average in March and 2 degrees above average now, they would still be warming up, right? So just because the anomalies stay the same doesn't mean the ocean temperatures haven't changed. And you'll see in a little bit, they certainly have. But out here in the Atlantic, in the East Tropical Atlantic, it is ridiculously warm. I mean, we're talking 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above average. It is almost like bathwater already. It is May. Hurricane season has not even started yet. The only place really, at least in the Atlantic, that's kind of below average is, from the Carolinas up the East Coast, which is pretty normal. right? That region will eventually catch up, but that's pretty normal. But the Caribbean, I mean, more modest compared to the tropical Atlantic, but still, the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico in some patches, right? Especially in the eastern central Gulf, the Bay of Campeche, we call it the southwestern Gulf of Mexico as well. All those areas also looking relatively, pretty warm, right? Now here, if I still had the graphics, I would show you from back in March. I mean, so this yellow line, okay, 25 degrees Celsius is about 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's about the threshold of sea surface temperatures that's typically conducive for tropical storms to form, right? Usually with hurricanes, you kind of want it to be over 80, but for tropical storms, 77 is still pretty good. And that's what this yellow line represents. Look how far north it's gotten, right? If you saw my first video, it was definitely like, it hadn't even gotten to the Gulf of Mexico yet. It was like all the way down here. So it's eventually going to keep rising farther to the north. And now we're well into the 80s at this point. The Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, even the East Tropical Atlantic, right? The places like maybe not the Cabo Verde Islands, right by Africa, but especially out here, into the East Tropical Atlantic, it's already well into the 80s, right? And it's warming up pretty fast. All right, so now let's see how the sea surface temperatures have changed in the past 7 days. Now keep in mind, this is the actual temperature now, we're not on anomalies anymore. So how the actual sea surface temperature has changed over the past week. You can see the northern Atlantic has just been lighting up recently. Some areas of 1 to 2, even over 2 degrees Celsius in just a week. So not only warming up, right? I would think warming up a degree Celsius in a week is significant. 1, 2 degrees Celsius is just insane. And so I think that's what we're going to be looking at, especially as we head towards this hurricane season, right? How these water temperatures are going to, or how they're going to affect the hurricanes. Even the Gulf of Mexico, right? They've been warming up. The Caribbean has been warming up slower, right? And that typically does happen because the Caribbean is already so warm. It's like it's almost done, right? But they're still warming up, but at a slower pace. So that's kind of a look at how things have changed in that regard. I just took a couple little snapshots here from windy.com to show you, right, towards the Bay of Campeche, 86 degrees Fahrenheit in this area right now. And the sea surface temperatures, and wow, look down to Mexico, 102 degree land temperature is crazy. And Merida down there. If we look at the eastern Gulf of Mexico, usually this spot is warmer. I've always been talking about this spot in the eastern central Gulf, and it's because usually because the current really, there's like a large current that kind of just swells around in here. It really allows that heat to build. Right, so 85 degrees is the temperature there. Now keep in mind, this is sea surface temperatures, right? And of course, but we have to look at how the waters are below the ocean surface. Right, so do keep that in mind as well. But still, obviously I can't, it's not like an interactive map. This is a screenshot, but mid 80s, same temperatures in the Gulf, pretty much across the entire Caribbean Sea at the moment. Now, this, if you saw the video from March, you're going to be referencing that a lot. But if you saw that video, this looks quite a bit different, right? We're seeing a lot more gaps now in the dry air layer, which is really honestly kind of abnormal because usually we don't see activity start to fire up over here in the eastern tropical Atlantic until like July, August, right? So even in June, right, conditions can be unfavorable here, whether it's wind shear, dry air, whatever it is. And the fact that we're seeing these large gaps where, if things were right, if the wind shear was down, we could see tropical activity in this area right now if the wind shear was just down. But I'll get to that in a second. But there's been big gaps. And sometimes it looks like there's not dry air because sometimes the clouds, like on the satellite, will kind of override this layer and it kind of makes it look like. But in this case, you can actually like see the ocean, like on the satellite imagery. It is blue. Like there is actually no dry air in this area, although there is another little patch on the way. Right, it kind of moves from east to west. Again, this is only a screenshot I can get, but you can see it moves from east to west. Right, so here's another little batch kind of on the east coast there. It makes for some pretty sunsets, though. That is for sure, and it does help prevent, tropical formation. So if you can get over the fact that it's kind of dust that's not necessarily good for you, it does have some good impacts. Now, if we look at the, this is the CHI map. This is also called the Madden-Julian Oscillation, or MJO. Essentially, this map is, the map points out which areas could see tropical activity, or not necessarily tropical activity, but convection. So essentially, green areas mean increased convection, orange, red areas mean less convection, if that makes sense. right? And you can see, I mean, patterns shift, right, kind of from east to or from west to east. So you can see over the Atlantic right now, right, not as many thunderstorms because with these kind of conditions, honestly, we could probably see a tropical storm if it wasn't for the lack of convection right now, if you will, right? If it wasn't for that. Now, as we head through time, however, notice the Gulf, right? It's kind of cut off, but you can tell it's the Gulf and the Caribbean on this map right here from June to June 1st. Looks like some increased convection, and that only builds, June 8th, or that might be a 6th, June 6th, June 11th. Yeah, they're 5-day increments. June 16th. Look, even out towards the East Tropical Atlantic, we could see some higher convection June 21st through the 28th, maybe lingering into early July. All right, so maybe if conditions are right, you're going to start to see a lot more, that monsoon season over Africa as well, right? Is why these storms move the way they do, right? So the monsoon season over Africa, there's a lot of rain. Those storms move from east to west, and they eventually move out to the Atlantic and become the hurricanes that we know so well. Now, here is the wind shear map. Again, it is May. This is supposed to kind of look like this, right? Higher wind shear over the Gulf. The Caribbean, there's some patches or pockets where it's not as bad and has been decreasing actually by 10 plus knots over the last day or so. But even there, even though it's dwindling, as it is over the East Tropical Atlantic, we're seeing some lessening wind shear by 10 knots or so. But again, still very high. Nothing is forming in this. The wind shear is above, in 90% of the tropical formation zone, like 90% of it is covered in like 40 knots of wind shear or higher. Which honestly, even 20 can be problematic unless it's like an already formed storm. And so 50, 40, 50 is not really it's going to prevent anything from forming at all. Right? And if anything were to form, it would probably be more subtropical. All right, so now if we're taking a look here so essentially this map is just showing us where storms typically form, right? And I only have June on this one because obviously June is the month that's coming up. So that's the month I kind of want to focus on at the moment. But you can see storms typically can form in the northern Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico, right? And the more likely spot, right? And this is just based on past climatological data, right? So the Eastern Gulf has been that spot where, it's more likely for storms to form in June. But again, any region in the Gulf of Mexico, the East Coast, the Caribbean, all these regions are certainly in play for the month of June, right? And it's not like everything's restricted to that area either. This is just, again, where it's more likely to happen. It could happen out in the tropical Atlantic, if things are, if nature really gets its act together. Now, this graphic, compared to my last video, has changed a little bit. So at first, there was an above 50% chance that in the month of July, right? Now, JJA, the way these months work is June, July, August, right? But the middle letter, usually, so this is July, this would be August, September, October, etc. Now, for the month of July, originally, the chance was above 50 that we were going to be in a La Nina pattern. Now that is lessened to about 49, as I explained at the beginning of the video. It's about a 49% chance. But still, nothing has changed. Like August, there's still a near 70% chance, and that only goes higher as the months go on into the early fall. So that just means that La Nina may arrive a little bit later than expected, a little bit later, right? And again, it's not like it won't happen. It's just down to a 50-50 chance as opposed to like a 55% chance that it was before. But we're still going to be in ENSO neutral as we are right now, right? That's 80, 90, put it at 100 because it's already here. And then, of course, chances for La Nina will only continue to increase, again, as the months go on. But what's not going to be there at all? El Nino, as those probabilities are near 0%. Because, again, it's either La Nina, or if we don't get there, the second most likely pattern would be neutral. But, again, La Nina, increasing chance of happening over the next couple of months. Now, if we look at the CFS model forecasts, right, you can see kind of highlighting what I just said. You can see the dwindling sea surface temperatures and sea surface temperature anomalies as well, right, to the point whereby, anywhere between July and August, we could be flirting with the La Nina line here. Right, so this line right here is the typical La Nina threshold, and by July, or maybe later in the month, it could certainly happen, right? And that would probably lead to, maybe August, we start adjusting to the pattern in late August, September, October. That's when the season will really fire off because the La Nina is settled in, right? The lag time is kind of over and, the season starts firing off. So that's what could happen. Now, does a La Nina, I kind of hear this question a lot sometimes. If a La Nina is present, does that mean the Atlantic will always be active? Not necessarily, because you could very well you could still have dry air that sets in, right? Because pretty much La Nina kind of and El Nino kind of influence the shear more than anything else, right? The sea surface temperatures are kind of independent from that, at least in the Atlantic Basin. So really, there could still be dry air, and the season could still be less active. But typically, everything comes together in a La Nina, so that the Atlantic hurricane season is usually more active, right? Because the reduced shear, right, and the dry air is already starting to dwindle, as I just showed you, right? And all these different things. The sea surface temperatures are so warm. So if we look here, kind of getting back to this, if we look at the model predictions from these batch of models, now this was from April, but still relatively recent. You can see again, dwindling chances of El Nino and neutral, and increasing chances here of La Nina. Maybe getting into some stronger La Nina territory, possibly, maybe into the autumn months. Alrighty, so if we look now, this is kind of like a table of, again, all the different months for the past 12 years. Just to show you that here's January, we are 1.8 degrees above average in that Nino 3-4 region. It dwindled to 1.5 in February and dropped even more to 1.1 in March. Right, so the rate really accelerated, if you will. Right? We noticed when we got into the El Nino, it was going up by 0.3 degrees Celsius-ish per month or so, maybe 0.2. Right, and now it's dropping by 0.3, even 0.4. So it's dropping pretty fast. And honestly, this doesn't update. This kind of has a month or two delay on it. So if April and May were to be added, which they're supposed to be, but again, it's a little bit of a delay. Again, we're back in the ENSO neutral, and you can see again, red El Nino, blue La Nina, and gray would be neutral. But we're already back in the ENSO neutral. I just wanted to show you how things have progressed over the last few months. Here's the latest weekly SST, or sea surface temperature departures. Here's that Nino 3-4 region, 0.2 degrees Celsius above average, which is right in the heart of neutral territory, right? Nino 3, so again, here's kind of like highlighting where that region is in case you didn't know, right? Kind of below Hawaii, if you will, kind of on the equator line. Nino 3, the region to the east, has slightly cooler waters, along with the Nino 1-2 region, kind of a flip-flop from last summer. And if we look at Nino 4, the region that's further west, right, that region's a little bit warmer, right, 0.7. So you take these two numbers, you put them together, you get the positive 0.2 degrees Celsius there, right? And it's not, like if you look, Nino 3-4 kind of encapsulates more of the Nino 3 region than it does 4, right? These are not even. This is more of a rectangle. This is more of a square. But that's the region, again, in case you didn't know, of where our El Nino and La Nina is determined. It's pretty fascinating how that works. Here's a look at the CDAS, right? This is the Tropical Tidbits website, all right, by Levi Cowan. This is his depiction, right? Obviously, Tropical Tidbits and CDAS, they kind of do their own, they possibly receive data a little bit differently. Now, their interpretation of Nino 3-4 is actually below the zero line at negative 0.12 degrees. So, in other words, 0.12 or 0.12 degrees below average. So, kind of about 0.3 degrees in terms of anomalies, 0.3 lower than what we had on the other observations here. But again, even lower, so that means getting to La Nina possibly faster if this measurement is accurate. I've heard things that CDAS potentially has a cooler sea surface temperature bias. I don't know if that's true, but I'd like to just show you all the data so both you and I can kind of see it for ourselves and make the decisions for ourselves. Right, but again, a big decline. My last video I did was around here, right, kind of like around March or so. So a big decline either way, whether it's 0.2, negative point, either way, from that point, there's a pretty big decline over the past couple of months. Now, this is just a look before getting to my forecast real quick, just a look at Tropical Tidbits, a GFS model. You can see that storm. There's potential little storm off the East Coast, right? And if we let this keep playing out a little bit, you can see another little low pressure system potentially getting sucked in, Hurricane Sandy style, maybe. That's just pretty far out at this point, but just some low pressure systems to kind of help you guys. I'll let this play one more time. So you can see this little organized little storm system. Maybe that becomes something subtropical in the next few days. We'll see. Unlikely as of now. But we see these big kind of non-tropical lows, right? Kind of sets up over Canada, kind of helps to pull this one in closer, right? Maybe another little low pressure moves to the southeast. Some convection off the east coast to watch out for. So again, just a little idea of what could be coming down the the pipeline here over the next couple of weeks. And the moment you've all been waiting for, hurricane season forecast number 2, updated today, May 22nd. If you notice, again, from the first video, it looks a lot different, right? Added a lot more. I think before, because I did the video in March last time, so I think we just had Weather Bell and myself. Now, it looks like, you know, we added the weather company, in other words, the Weather Channel. We added Colorado State University. We added AccuWeather, right? Some of the sources that I kind of found. So if we look, the average, the 1991 to 2020 average, right, which is different than the 1981 to 2010 average, because in 2021 we got the new set of averages. Expectations went up, right? So now the average season is 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes, as opposed to the old 12, 6, and 3 it was before. Last year we had 20 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. So again, it was about average, but in the named storm regard, like I said, it was a little bit more active than usual. Now, and then everything to the right of this black line is this year's forecast. So Colorado State University, 23 named storms, 11 hurricanes, and 5 major hurricanes, which is an insane number. The weather company, the Weather Channel, goes even higher with that, 25 named storms, 12 hurricanes, and 6 major hurricanes. Like this would be like a rival of like a 2004-2005 season, which is crazy. Because honestly, I believe ever since, I want to say 2017 or 18, I think every hurricane season has either been about average or above average. And maybe 2022 might be an exception. But that season was still, you know, we still had some memorable storms. But honestly, in other words, weather was, you know, average, slightly below, slightly above. I honestly think over the past like 10 years or 8 years, we haven't had like a quiet hurricane season. So kind of an alarming trend, right? Especially the last few years. But either way, Weather Bell, again, you saw this from last video, 25 to 30 named storms, 14 to 16 hurricanes, and 6 to 8 major hurricanes. And AccuWeather's forecast, 20 to 25 named storms, 8 to 12 hurricanes, 4 to 7 major hurricanes. Right, now do keep in mind that not all of these, you know, whether it's 20, 25, whatever, how many storms, not all of them will make landfall, but a good chunk of them could, depending on steering patterns, and that I can't predict right now. We'll just have to see. We'll have to wait till the hurricane or disturbance actually forms before we can see where they go. Now, if we look at my forecast, 18 to 22 named storms, 9 to 12 hurricanes, and 4 to 6 major hurricanes, which is certainly quite the uptick from the last video. From the last video, I was kind of forecasting a similar to 2023 kind of season, where it was like slightly above average, but not by too much. Now, you know, seeing all the data I just showed you, seeing all these different sources that I'm showing you right now, that definitely leads me to, you know, up these numbers. And honestly, they could get raised even more, honestly. But this is for right now. This is what it's looking like in my forecast, as you can see right there on your screen. So that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am the Weather Dude signing off till next time, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.